The Galactic Council chamber was a cathedral of alien design, marble from a dozen worlds, banners from hundreds more, and light that shimmered in colors no human eye had evolved to see. Once, Earth's flag had hung among them, its blue and green standing proud beside the crimson of the Thalkiri, the gold of the Dreven, and the silver-white of the Lyris Dominion. Now it was gone. Ambassador Elias Kane stood alone at the center dais, his uniform plain compared to the silken robes of the delegates arrayed in a half-circle before him. The air was thick with the perfume of ceremonial incense, masking the stench of politics. The council speaker, a towering insectoid with crystalline eyes, tapped the staff of authority against the floor. By unanimous decree, the speaker intoned, "The species known as Homo sapiens is hereby expelled from the council. Effective immediately, all treaties are dissolved, all shared technologies revoked, all military obligations void. Humanity's seat shall remain vacant until further notice." No applause followed, only the cold rustle of robes and the scratching of styluses as the decision was entered into the eternal record. Kane's jaw tightened, but his voice was steady. "The council may erase our flag from your walls. You cannot erase our history, nor the debts written in the blood of our dead." The Dreven delegate, scales glistening under the chamber lights, leaned forward. "History is irrelevant. Your kind is reckless, unpredictable, dangerous to the stability we have built." Stability. Kane's tone was sharp enough to cut through the chamber's stillness. When the Carrick fleet swept through the Orion arm, who stood in their way? When the Void Plague came from the dark between galaxies, who burned their own colonies to stop its spread? Humanity did. Not because we owed you, because it was right. The speaker's crystalline eyes dimmed in irritation. "Enough. Remove him." Two Thalkiri guards stepped forward, their armor gleaming. Kane didn't resist as they escorted him from the chamber, but as the heavy doors closed behind him, he allowed himself one last glance at the empty space where Earth's flag had once hung. It wasn't rage that filled him, but clarity. History's pages turned slowly, but they always turned. And one day, the same voices that had cast them out would call for them again. Years passed. Humanity withdrew beyond the frontier, retreating to its own systems. Trade dwindled. Diplomatic ties withered. What remained of the fleet became a shield turned inward, guarding against threats the council dismissed as ghosts. They called it isolationism. Humanity called it survival, and then the war came. It began at the edge of council space, a border colony wiped out overnight, the only warning a distress call that ended in static. Then another world, and another. The invaders, the Vayer Dominion, didn't negotiate. They didn't occupy. They erased. Entire biospheres scoured clean, cities reduced to glass, skies blackened with ash. The council panicked. Fleets scrambled. Treaties were invoked, then abandoned. In the end, it didn't matter. Against the Dominion's war engines, the proudest navies of the council shattered like brittle glass. On the council floor, the same speaker who had read humanity's expulsion now spoke with a tremor in his voice. "We must petition the Terrans for aid." The Dreven delegate hissed, "They will not come, not after what we did." The chamber fell silent, the weight of history pressing on every seat. On the Terran homeworld of New Avalon, Ambassador Kane, now an old man, stood in the fleet command hall. Before him, the admirals of the United Systems waited. The message from the council lay open on the table, its words heavy with desperation. "They ask for help," Kane said quietly. "After casting us out, after calling us dangerous, Admiral Reyes leaned forward, her dark eyes unblinking. "Are we going?" Kane's gaze swept the room, his voice low but firm. "We are human. We do not fight because they love us. We fight because we know what happens when evil goes unanswered." Outside, the great shipyards lit the night, the silhouettes of battleships taking shape against the stars. The Council had cast them out. Now the galaxy was crying, and humanity was listening. The docks of High Point shipyard roared with life. Under the glow of arc lamps, welders sparked along the spines of warships, technicians swarmed over hull plating, and freight drones ferried ammunition into cavernous magazines. It was the sound of a sleeping giant stirring after years of silence. From the observation deck, Admiral Reyes watched the fleet assemble, sleek destroyers, carrier groups, and the heavy shadows of battleships, each bearing the insignia of the United Systems fleet. For decades, they had defended only human space. Now, for the first time since the expulsion, their bows would point toward the Council's heart. Her second-in-command, Commander Aisha Varick, stepped up beside her. "Final muster report. 134 ships ready for immediate deployment. Another 48 will follow within the month." Reyes didn't answer right away. Her eyes were on the flagship, the UNS Vigilant, being towed from dry dock. It wasn't the largest ship in the fleet, but it had history: Orion Plague Containment, the defense of Arcadia, the Carrack Breakout, a vessel that had already written its name in the hard pages of war. "Have the men and women aboard been told where we're going?" she asked. "They know enough," Varick said. "They know we're leaving for Council space, and they know the enemy. Then they know why." 2 days later, the Vigilant led the fleet through the slipstream gate. The stars bent and blurred, streaking past in a wash of white light. In the war room, a three-dimensional projection displayed their course, through neutral sectors, around Dominion-occupied zones, and into what was left of Council-controlled space. Kane stood at the center table, leaning on his cane but sharp-eyed as ever. "We'll arrive at Hekara in 6 days. It's the largest Council world still holding. If it falls, the Dominion will have a staging ground for the entire spiral arm." Reyes studied the projection. "What's their defense?" Kane's expression was grim. "What's left of the Dreven home fleet? 3 carriers, a handful of cruisers, and whatever militia ships they can scrape together." "Not enough," Reyes said flatly. "No," Kane agreed. "That's why they called us." The closer they drew to Council territory, the more evidence of the Dominion's path appeared: burned-out colonies, drifting wreckage fields, silent beacons that had once guided trade routes. Every wreck was a grave, and every grave was a reminder. In the mess halls, fleet veterans spoke in low voices about the old days when humans and aliens had stood shoulder to shoulder. Younger recruits listened, some skeptical, others awed, but all beginning to understand the weight of what they were walking into. It wasn't just another war. It was a reckoning. On the 6th day, they dropped out of slip space on the edge of the Hekara system and straight into chaos. Council ships were already in retreat, their formations shattered, fighters scattered like leaves in a storm. The Dominion's attack fleet pressed forward, spearheaded by black, wedge-shaped dreadnoughts whose plasma lances cut through hulls as if they were paper. The planetary shield over Hekara flickered under the assault, its failure inevitable. "Target priority?" Varick asked, hands hovering over the tactical board. Rey's voice was steady, but it carried the iron of command. "We hold the line." The Vigilant surged forward, her forward batteries opening fire. Kinetic slugs, invisible to the naked eye but moving at a fraction of light speed, smashed into a Dominion cruiser, shattering its bow and sending it spinning into the planet's gravity well. Human destroyers darted through the melee, launching torpedoes into the blind spots of enemy capital ships. Carrier groups deployed fighter wings in disciplined waves, covering retreating Council vessels and driving the Dominion back from the shield perimeter. It was the first time in years that human ships had fought under the eyes of the Council, and it was nothing like the Council remembered. There was no hesitation, no posturing, only precision, aggression, and the grim determination of a people who had already faced extinction and survived. On the bridge of a battered Dreven carrier, an alien commander watched the human fleet carve into the Dominion line. For the first time in weeks, the voice on his comm carried hope. "They came," he whispered. "The humans came." As the battle dragged on, Reyes knew this was only the beginning. The Dominion would not be stopped in a single engagement, but with every enemy hull shattered and every ally pulled from the fire, the truth spread through comm channels and battlefield rumor alike. The Council had cast humanity out, but humanity had returned, not for vengeance but for the lives that could still be saved. And that made them more dangerous than any empire in the galaxy. The Hekara system burned. Dominion dreadnoughts pushed hard against the shielded world, their lances of white-hot plasma raking across orbital defenses. Fragments of shattered stations and dead ships drifted in chaotic orbits, lit by the flares of continuous weapons fire. Above the chaos, the Vigilant held position at the center of the human formation, its hull trembling from the recoil of her main batteries. Enemy flagship identified. Commander Varric reported, her voice clipped but steady. Designation, Vayer Bloodfang, forward shields at 84%, no visible damage. Admiral Reyes studied the tactical display, noting the concentration of Dominion escorts around the massive vessel. They're using it as the hammerhead for the assault. Break it and their line collapses. Kane leaned on the edge of the table, his voice calm despite the din of battle. The Bloodfang's captain will never retreat, not out of fear, out of arrogance. That's your opening. Reyes nodded. Helm, bring us into lance range. Gunnery, prep the spinal rail. The Vigilant cut across the kill zone, enemy fire washing over her forward shields in a shimmering aurora. A Dreven cruiser moved to cover her flank, taking a full plasma strike meant for the flagship, its hull ruptured, venting atmosphere into the void. "They bought us 3 seconds, Varric said through clenched teeth. "Make them count." The spinal rail cannon fired with a soundless shudder, the slug streaking across the gap at a fraction of light speed. It hit the Bloodfang's prow with a kinetic force that bent metal like paper, tearing through forward armor and crippling one of its main plasma emitters. The Dominion's response was immediate. 3 escorts broke formation, diving toward the Vigilant. Human destroyers intercepted, their missile salvos flaring bright against the black. One destroyer, the Ironwake, took a direct hit and split in 2, but not before ramming an escort head-on, detonating both ships in a blossom of light. Bloodfang's shields collapsing, shouted tactical. "Forward hull breaches detected." "Finish it," Reyes ordered. Fighter wings swarmed over the enemy dreadnought, delivering precision torpedo strikes into the wounds opened by the railgun slug. Explosions rippled along its superstructure, internal fires flashing against the void. Finally, the massive vessel split, its 2 halves drifting apart before secondary detonations consumed them both. A cheer erupted on the Vigilant's bridge, but it was short-lived. From the planet's surface, the Hekara defense grid flickered, then went dark. The planetary shield had failed. Dominion ground assault carriers, hidden until now, plunged into the atmosphere. Trails of fire marked their descent. Through open comm channels, human crews could hear the desperate calls from Hekara's surface. Militia commanders, civilians, even children, all screaming for help. Reyes turned to Kane. If we pull ships from orbit to intercept, the fleet above will break. Kane's eyes were cold, but his voice was soft. And if we don't, the people below will burn. It was the oldest choice in war: save the many or save the few. Reyes made her decision. Detach the 9th and 12th squadrons. Tell them to make sure Hekara wakes up tomorrow. On the tactical board, icons peeled away from the main formation, diving into the atmosphere. They would be outnumbered and outgunned. Many would not return. Hours later, the Dominion fleet was in full retreat, what remained of their ships vanishing into slipspace. The skies over Hekara were scarred with fire, but the planet still turned. In the Council's emergency chamber, alien delegates listened in stunned silence to the battle reports. Against the Dominion's most feared warship, the humans had not only held, they had driven them back. And when the choice came, they had risked their own victory to protect lives that were not their own. For the first time since the expulsion, the word trust entered the Council's vocabulary in connection with humanity. As the Vigilant limped away from Hekara, its crew exhausted and battered, Reyes stood on the bridge, looking out at the distant stars. "Admiral," Varric said quietly, "why risk so much for people who once turned their backs on us?" Reyes didn't look away from the viewport. "Because one day, someone will need to risk everything for us. And I'd like them to remember we did the same." The Council chamber had not changed since the day humanity's flag was torn from its place. The marble still gleamed. The banners of the member species still hung in perfect symmetry, though some bore new stains from worlds that no longer existed. The same faint scent of incense curled in the air, as if trying to mask the rot beneath. But this time, humanity had returned, and not as petitioners. Admiral Reyes entered flanked by 2 fleet guards, her uniform immaculate despite the bruises from Hekara. Behind her walked Ambassador Kane tapping steadily on the polished floor. The alien delegates shifted uneasily in their seats, some avoiding eye contact, others staring as if trying to reconcile memory with reality. The Council speaker rose. "Admiral, Ambassador, on behalf of the Galactic Council, we extend our gratitude for your defense of Hekara." Rey's eyes swept the chamber, her voice cool. "Your gratitude is noted, but I am not here for thanks. I am here because the Dominion will not stop with Hekara, you know this." The Drevan delegate leaned forward, his scaled hands clasped tightly. "You expect us to trust you with the defense of Council space after—" Kane cut him off, his voice sharp. "After you expelled us, after you stripped us of allies, trade, and shared intelligence. Yes, that is exactly what you should do, not because you trust us, but because you have no other choice." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Thalkiri representative clicked her mandibles in irritation. "And if we refuse?" Reyes stepped forward, her boots echoing on the marble. "Then you will fight alone, and you will lose. You've seen our fleets. You've seen the cost we're willing to pay. The Dominion has not." The Lyris Dominion's silver-robed envoy, one of the few who had always spoken to humans with civility, raised his voice over the murmurs. "Perhaps we should hear their proposal." Kane turned toward him. "We propose a unified command structure, human and Council fleets operating as one under shared intelligence and coordinated strategy. No politics, No vetoes, a war council with operational control given to those with the will to win. The speaker's crystalline eyes dimmed. That is unprecedented. So is the enemy, Kane said. The arguments raged for hours. Old wounds were reopened. Grievances hurled across the chamber like weapons. Some delegates spoke of honor, others of survival. A few still clung to the belief that the Dominion could be bought off with territory or tribute. Reyes let them argue until the noise became meaningless. Then she spoke, her voice low but carrying to every corner of the chamber. War does not care about your pride. It does not care about your titles, your histories, or your politics. It cares only about who survives it. You can hate us after the Dominion is gone, but until then, you will stand beside us or beneath the ashes of your worlds. The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting match. When the vote came, it was close, too close. But the measure passed. The War Council was formed. For the first time in galactic history, humans sat at the head of a table that spanned species. Admirals of the United Systems Fleet stood beside Dreven strategists, Thalkiri swarm leaders, and Lyris tacticians. Maps of Dominion-controlled space glowed in 3 dimensions above the table, their crimson boundaries pulsing like a wound. Reyes looked around the room, knowing trust would not come overnight, if it came at all, but the first step had been taken. Kane leaned close to her, his voice almost a whisper. "You've just been handed the greatest weapon in this war." "And what's that?" Reyes asked. "Every soldier in this room," Kane said. "Because now they fight with something to prove." Outside the chamber, as the delegations dispersed, whispers spread through the corridors of the capital. The humans are back. They command the war now. And the Dominion will learn what that means. The War Council's first joint operation was not a simple strike. It was a statement. The Dominion fortress world of Calris was a linchpin in their expansion, a supply hub and staging point for 3 active fronts. Taking it would not only cripple their war effort, it would show the galaxy that the new alliance could strike back. The briefing chamber aboard the Vigilant was crowded with alien officers. Dreven fleet tacticians hunched over their own star charts. Thalkiri swarm leaders clicked and chittered among themselves. Lyris Dominion strategists stood silently, silver eyes tracking every shift in the holographic projection. Admiral Reyes stood at the head of the table. Calris is heavily defended. Triple-layered planetary shields, orbital gun arrays, and a surface garrison numbering in the millions. The Dominion believes it cannot be taken without losses so catastrophic that no sane commander would try. They are wrong, a Dreven Commodore hissed softly. Or you are. Reyes met his gaze without flinching. We're not here to be cautious. We're here to win. She outlined the plan, human fleets punching a corridor through the orbital defense grid, Thalkiri swarms diving to disable shield generators, and Dreven heavy cruisers delivering concentrated bombardment to breach the fortress walls. Every step relied on precision timing. Every delay could mean disaster. 3 days later, the Allied fleet emerged from slipspace on the edge of the Calris system. Dominion sensors lit up instantly. The fortress world's defense network came alive, thousands of gun emplacements tracking the incoming armada. In the cold void, the silence before battle felt like a held breath. "Signal the swarm," Reyes ordered. "Begin the dance." The Vigilant's main batteries fired first, tearing a path through the initial defense line. Thalkiri carriers spewed swarms of biomechanical strike craft. their erratic flight patterns weaving through flak bursts to reach the shield generators. Dreven cruisers moved in behind, unleashing sustained plasma barrages. It was chaos. Controlled chaos for the humans, but chaos all the same. On the flank, a Dreven captain broke formation, trying to shield his own damaged vessel instead of holding the line. The gap he left allowed a Dominion gunship squadron to slip through, targeting the Thalkiri assault wings. In seconds, half the swarm's forward assault was shredded. Ray's voice cut through the tactical net. "Patch me through to the Dreven captain." His image flickered onto her display, scales glistening with sweat. My ship was at risk, and now so is the entire operation, Ray's snapped. We don't win this war by protecting our pride. We win it by protecting each other. Get back in formation. The alien hesitated, then gave the order. The tide began to turn. A Thalkiri strike wing managed to cripple one of the primary shield generators, and human destroyers exploited the opening with precision railgun fire. The second generator fell minutes later under Dreven bombardment, their crews pushing harder after seeing human ships move to cover them. With the shields down, the Allied fleet unleashed its full fury. Calrus orbital guns went silent one by one. The surface fortress took a pounding that lit the night side of the planet like a second sun. When the Dominion fleet finally broke, it was not because they were outgunned. It was because they were outmaneuvered. The coordination that had faltered in the opening moments had, under fire, transformed into a single will to win. As the fortress burned, Rays addressed the War Council via secure link. "This is what happens when we stop counting who bleeds more and start counting who survives together. If we can hold that, we can end this war." Even the Dreven Commodore, who had doubted her from the start, inclined his head in silent respect. In the mess halls of human ships, the phrase began to circulate, "Iron Horizon." A reminder that when the line held, the horizon belonged to them. Victory at Calrus had shaken the Dominion, but it had not broken them. In the weeks after the fortress fell, intelligence reports showed their fleets pulling back from several contested sectors. To the War Council, it looked like the beginning of a collapse. To Admiral Reyes, it felt like bait. Her instincts were confirmed when a secure transmission came in from Lyris intelligence. The Dominion's retreat wasn't a retreat, it was a feint. Their true strike was aimed not at the front, but deep behind it at Carthos Prime, the logistical heart of the Alliance. If Carthos fell, the war would end in weeks, not in victory but in starvation and disarray. The Allied fleet scrambled, but Carthos was far beyond the reach of the main forces. The only vessels close enough to respond were a human rapid response group under Captain Aaron Vale aboard the USF Resolute. 4 destroyers, 2 frigates, and a single carrier, barely enough to defend a mining colony, let alone the supply world for an entire war. Ray's orders to Vale were simple. Hold Carthos, no matter the cost. They arrived in system hours before the Dominion. Carthos Prime's orbital yards were vast but unfortified. Its planetary defense grid was built for peacetime deterrence, not war. Vale immediately set about turning every civilian ship, every station-mounted mass driver, and every shuttle with an engine into a weapon. When the Dominion fleet emerged from slipspace, it was like a shadow falling over the system. 24 warships, including a pair of heavy siege carriers designed to bombard from beyond defensive range. Vale didn't wait for them to form up. "Signal all ships. We hit them now." The Resolute surged forward, destroyers flanking, frigates darting ahead to unleash torpedoes into the Dominion's vanguard. Civilian freighters, stripped down and jury-rigged with magnetic charges, threw themselves at enemy hulls. It was chaos, beautiful, desperate chaos, but the numbers told the truth. One by one, the human ships went down. The carrier Vanguard's light took a direct hit, her hangar exploding in a spray of molten debris. The destroyer Kestrel rammed a Dominion cruiser head-on, crippling it before breaking apart in silence. On the Resolute's bridge, alarms screamed as plasma fire tore through the forward shields. Vale kept his voice level. "Helm, bring us alongside that siege carrier. Gunnery, prepare all remaining ordnance." His XO hesitated. "Sir, that's suicide." Vale allowed himself a thin smile. "Only if it doesn't work." The Resolute's final run was a thing of savage grace, rolling to spread incoming fire, slipping under the siege carrier's shield arc, and unleashing every missile, rail slug, and plasma torpedo they had left into its launch bays. The carrier's internal munitions went up in a blinding explosion, tearing the vessel apart. But the blast wave caught the Resolute in its wake, ripping through her hull. She broke in two, the halves drifting, venting fire and debris into the black. The remaining Dominion ships, leaderless and bleeding, withdrew. Carthos was safe. Days later, Admiral Reyes stood at the memorial wall on New Avalon. The names of Vale and his crew were freshly etched among the fallen. Behind her, the Drevan Commodore who had once doubted humanity approached in silence. "You sent them knowing they wouldn't come back," he said quietly. Reyes didn't turn. "I sent them because they were the only ones who could." The alien regarded the wall for a long time before speaking again. "You fight differently from us, not just with ships or strategy, but with yourselves. That is why you win." Reyes finally looked at him. "No, that's why we survive. Winning is something else entirely." In the War Council chamber, word of Carthos Prime's defense spread like wildfire. For the first time, no delegate questioned humanity's place at the table. And for the first time, some began to wonder, not whether the humans could save them, but whether they themselves could learn to fight like humans. The Dominion line was not a single wall. It was a chain of fortress systems stretching across 3 sectors, each one bristling with orbital batteries, minefields, and fleets bred for defense. For a century, no enemy had breached it. Those who tried vanished into silence. The War Council had debated for weeks about how to face it. Some argued to bypass it, others to grind it down over years. But Admiral Reyes knew time was the one thing they did not have. Every day the Dominion held the line, they tightened their grip on occupied worlds. The plan she presented was audacious, reckless, according to some. Strike at Korath's gate, the most heavily defended segment, and break through in one decisive blow. Once the gate fell, the entire line would unravel. The Allied fleet assembled in the dead system of Chiros, hidden from Dominion scouts by the gravity wells of collapsed stars. Thousands of ships, human battleships, Drevan heavy cruisers, Valkyrie swarm carriers, drifted in silent formation, awaiting the order to move. Reyes stood before the War Council's holographic link, her voice steady. "This is not just a battle. This is the turning point. Win here and we carry the war into their heart. Lose and there will be no second chance." Even the most skeptical delegates gave a silent nod. The strike began at dawn local time on Korath's gate. Human stealth frigates slipped into the minefields first, their hulls wrapped in sensor-dampening fields. They painted safe corridors through the deadly expanse, guiding the main fleet forward. The Dominion reacted instantly, deploying squadrons of interceptors in tight waves. Valkyrie swarms met them head-on, twisting through enemy formations with lethal precision. In the void beyond, Dreven cruisers formed a protective wall around the human battleships. On the bridge of the Vigilant, Rays watched the tactical display light up with hostile contacts. All ships, forward batteries, fire for effect. The blackness of space became a storm of light and fire. Rail slugs tore through shields, plasma bolts flared against armor, and the minefields detonated in chain reactions that shook entire sectors. Midway through the assault, human marines boarded a captured Dominion frigate. The intel they found confirmed what Rays had long suspected. The line wasn't just a defensive structure. It was also a prison grid. Hundreds of occupied worlds were tied to its supply chain, their populations enslaved to fuel the war machine. Every supply convoy, every fuel depot along the line carried not only munitions, but people shackled, starved, and marked for transport deeper into Dominion space. Rays broadcast the images to the War Council and every Allied fleet in the fight. The effect was immediate. The Dreven Commodore's voice came over the net, tight with fury. "Admiral Rays, Dreven ships are committing to the breach. We will not stop until they are free." Valkyrie swarm leaders followed, abandoning cautious engagement for a relentless drive toward the gate. The turning point came when the Vigilant and two Dreven dreadnoughts targeted the gate's primary shield generators. For hours, they hammered the massive structures, taking punishing fire in return. Finally, the shields collapsed in a flare of shattered light, and the combined fleet surged through. Dominion resistance broke. The surviving enemy ships fled into the deeper sectors, leaving the wreckage of the line behind. In the aftermath, the War Council chambers echoed with a new understanding. The war was no longer about reclaiming territory or defending worlds. It was about liberation. And the symbol of that liberation was not the Council. It was humanity, the outcasts who had returned to fight for those who once cast them aside. On the Vigilance Bridge, Rays stood beside Kane as the fleet regrouped. "We've opened the door," she said quietly. Kane nodded. "Now comes the hard part, walking through it without losing who we are." The Dominion capital was unlike anything the Allied fleet had ever faced. The system's primary star was dimmed by an artificial shroud, a web of titanic orbital fortresses forming a steel cocoon around the homeworld. Millions of weapons batteries tracked every vector, supported by defense fleets bred and trained for centuries for this one purpose, repelling the impossible. And yet, here humanity stood, at the head of the impossible. Admiral Ray's voice carried across the fleet-wide channel. "We've fought for worlds we'd never seen, for people who once turned their backs on us, for a galaxy that thought we were expendable. Today, we fight for something more, for the day when no one will ever live under the Dominion's chains again." No further speeches were needed. The order came: engage. The assault began with a coordinated strike across 3 vectors. Human supercarriers launched fighter wings in disciplined waves, covering Dreven heavy cruisers as they pushed into the inner defense perimeter. Valkyrie swarms tunneled through the gaps, targeting shield nodes buried deep within the fortress grid. The Dominion responded with a ferocity unmatched in any prior battle. Siege lances cut swaths through Allied lines, shattering ships with pinpoint strikes. Boarding parties teleported into Dreven command decks, forcing brutal hand-to-hand fights in the void. On the Vigilant, alarms blared as plasma torpedoes tore through the starboard flank. Rays refused to yield position. "If we fall back now, they'll close the gap. Hold the line." The ship shuddered under repeated impacts, yet her forward batteries kept firing, punch for punch, blow for blow. Then came the moment that would define the war. Deep scans revealed a massive power source at the heart of the Dominion's command citadel, not a reactor, but a containment field holding millions of prisoners. They were the political dissidents, rebel soldiers, and entire populations taken from occupied worlds over centuries, kept alive as leverage and as labor. Destroying the citadel would cripple the Dominion instantly, but it would also kill every soul inside. The War Council's voices clashed over the secure channel, some urging the strike, others condemning it. Reyes didn't speak for a long time. She looked at Kane, whose eyes were fixed on the data feed. "They're daring us to become them," he said quietly. "If we do, we win the war but lose the reason we fought it." Finally, Reyes keyed the fleet channel. "All ships shift fire. Disable the Citadel's weapons. We're going in to get them out." Gasps echoed from alien commanders, but no one argued. Orders relayed, formations shifted, and the Allied fleet began the most dangerous maneuver of the war, breaching without destroying. The operation took hours that felt like days. Boarding teams from every species fought through labyrinthine corridors, dismantling security systems and freeing prisoners. Human Marines led the final push into the central chamber, breaking the locks on the containment fields. When the prisoners saw who had come for them, humans, side by side with aliens, the disbelief was palpable. Many had not seen a free sky in decades. With the Citadel disarmed and the captives safe, the Allied fleet delivered the final blow, not to exterminate but to dismantle. The Dominion's ruling council was captured alive, their fleets disarmed, their worlds freed. In the War Council chamber weeks later, no one spoke of humanity as outcasts. They were now the standard by which others measured courage and restraint. Kane's closing words at the first peacetime session echoed in every delegate's mind. "Power is proven not by what you can destroy, but by what you choose to spare." As the Vigilant left Dominion space for the last time, Reyes stood alone on the observation deck. The stars ahead were no longer hostile, just endless, waiting to be written into something better. Humanity had been cast out, and had returned not with vengeance alone, but with the will to change the very rules of the galaxy. And somewhere, far beyond the war, the first seeds of a different future began to grow.